Hello, my name is Deep Bhattacharjee. I lead product management for compliance within Google Cloud Security, and I'll be joined by my colleague Ruchi Khurana. And together we will talk about compliance in the cloud and specifically the trends that we're seeing in the compliance space and how Google is trying to address some of these problems for our customers. So first I want to talk a little bit about the Uber trends that we're seeing. So what we see is that there's a major shift left that is happening in the compliance space where customers want to address compliance-related issues as early in their technology lifecycle as possible. As a result, we are seeing a lot of technology-driven compliance automation. So one aspect of that is real-time compliance monitoring. A second aspect of that is automated evidence generation. We're also seeing a lot of global trends in global harmonization across compliance regimes, compliance trends. And given the Gen AI trends, we see a lot of AI ML driven predictive analytics, risk assessments for compliance, etc. So compliance is a fairly dynamic thing that with ever-changing regulations across the globe and more and more standards showing up every day, enterprises want to stay ahead or very quickly adapt to these standards. So how does one go about it? And that's a place where we spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we will talk a little bit about how we look at compliance, how we think about it. So fundamentally, customers are trying to reduce their overall risk, whether it comes to security risk, privacy, or compliance. Customers first need a common way to express that risk reduction intent. So ideally, they'd like to enforce that intent so that there's no way to violate it. Or they want to make sure they can apply that in a very flexible manner. If they cannot enforce it, then they would minimally want to be able to detect any misconfigurations, remediate that risk or risk accept it. And last but not the least is generate evidence that they were doing the right thing by their enterprise regulations or the regulations of the industry or country they operate in. So Google's approach to compliance is to have a very similar approach to managing compliance, security, privacy, risks, and expressing intent across the entire shared responsibility spectrum. So across both the CSP, the cloud vendor's responsibility, as well as the customer responsibility. So we break down the layers into the three pieces: the underlying cloud service provider's infrastructure or platform, the customer workloads that run in that cloud, and as well as the data that the customers generate. So we have a very software-defined approach, and that is one reason why we do not have a separate GovCloud region for our customers. All US regions, for example, within all US regions, our customers can deploy workloads and configure them to be FedRAMP High or IL4, IL5 compliant. The same technology for expressing and enforcing compliance intent can be applied across Google services as well as the workloads that customers deploy and the data they generate. So I'm going to hand it off to Ruchi to talk about each of these layers and how compliance can be achieved in each layer. Over to you, Ruchi.
Thanks, Deep. Hi, everyone. I'm Ruchi Khurana. I'm a lead product manager on compliance products at Google. Let me first start with the platform compliance, because as a cloud provider, it's very important for you to know that the cloud provider you are going ahead with is a trustworthy platform. And we have few principles of trust that we always say are first principles here. The number one here is data. When it comes to the data, we have commitment towards our customers on you own your data and you control your data. We have baked in a lot of controls for our customers to manage their own data, and that's also part of our transparency commitment for our customers. Secondly, it's resilience. As we all know, especially after the COVID-19 and geopolitical, the world is changing and resiliency is becoming the top priority for everyone. Even the regulations like DORA and UK CTP is focusing a lot on resiliency. So from a cloud provider platform perspective, we want to make sure that the platform is highly resilient and customer have right set of rules and configuration that they can choose to make sure they are deploying their workload in right region and has right backup plan and disaster recovery plan and whatnot. Number 3, and very important piece of it, is data protection and security. Security is in core of everything we do, how we design our products, security by design, how we roll out our products, how we develop platform. We are a security first company and we want to make sure the security is front and center of everything when we are building the platform and our services. Last but not the least, once we have the right security principles and control and set, it helps us to satisfy compliance and regulatory requirements. And there is no compliance without security and no security without compliance. So compliance is super important for us as a part of trust principles. Looking at compliance, we not only meet and exceed all the compliance requirements, but we also undergo a tremendous amount of audits and attestation throughout the year. And we make these audit reports available for our customers to consume to ensure they have transparency into how the cloud provider like Google is implementing those compliance regimes and controls. Not only that, but we also work with a lot of global standard setting bodies, and CSA is a great example here, where we are working hand in hand in influencing the direction of the future regulation. As Deep did talk about, the future of compliance is more around automation and machine-readable evidence generation. We are working with CSA super closely on compliance automation revolution, working group to make sure all the new standards that we are setting can be automated, and we have a path towards more automated compliance as a future. Now, that was more from a base layer or a platform layer perspective. Now, achieving continuous workload compliance in cloud is another big topic that I want to touch about. As we all know that when you are moving to cloud environment, which is also like dynamic, compliance environment is also dynamic, things are changing. There are a lot of questions that compliance, risk, and audit teams are facing, like how do I scope my controls or my regime to a cloud environment? How does this is applicable on a resource level, application level, project level? How do I even implement controls in cloud? I'm so used to writing the policies and processes. How do I enforce certain controls to prevent violation? And if a violation is detected, how do I remediate the misconfiguration and violation of those controls? How do I manage the entire risk in the cloud? How I can reduce the audit burden, generate machine-readable evidences for auditing cloud, and how I can simply get a full-fledged compliance reports about when I'm auditing my cloud environment. So as you know, you all have these challenges, and you might be having all of these questions. And not to add to these challenges, but there is also a big challenge, especially for the organization which are global and have multiple teams. How do I work with and collaborate with other teams like SRE and application engineering and LOD1, LOD2, LOD3? How I can break down organizational silos so from the compliance perspective, everybody is on the same page. And not only that everybody is on the same page on day 0 of cloud journey, but how we can go together from day 0 to day N after 2 years, 3 years of the cloud journey, and how we can stay compliant and mitigate the risk together. Okay, so enough about the problems. What is the solution? The solution here is we are introducing Compliance Manager. Compliance Manager offers end-to-end security, privacy, and compliance for configuration, monitoring, and audit of infrastructure, workload, and data. I'm going to go a little bit deep into Compliance Manager, but before I do that, some basics, right? And you all know these basics of framework compliance, things like that, but with respect to Compliance Manager and putting things in perspective, we're going to say framework can be any industry-defined framework, any unified organization framework that you're gonna build, any framework that we as a cloud provider are recommending as best practices that we think will be the best practices and the baseline for you, or any regulatory framework. For the sake of simplicity, we're just gonna call it framework. And as we all know, frameworks are divided into a bunch of controls and requirement. For the sake of simplicity, for cloud, we're gonna call it cloud controls. Cloud controls, think of them as more technical controls, like technical policies, security configurations that you can configure to achieve the intent of the control. As we know, the industry is moving towards more machine-readable and automated compliance, and also able to express the intent in different policy format like Rego and cell expression. So those are the part of cloud control. So before I go, those were some basics I wanted you to be aware of. Now, going into the configuration mode, right? Like how customer can configure compliance in the cloud. To achieve the configurations, customers can deploy frameworks in multiple modes. They can deploy frameworks at an org level, folder level, or project level. It can be in preventative mode, detective mode, or audit mode as per your risk appetite and as per you're gonna monitor that particular framework. And underneath framework are cloud control. As I said, they're cloud agnostic, parameterized intent, which used to satisfy your compliance requirements. Think of them as like the basic Lego block. On top of it, you can write your own cloud controls if a control is not available, like bring your own cloud control, and you can use AI to write your cloud controls as well. Once you have these building blocks together of frameworks and controls, you can deploy it against the resources in Google Cloud. Once you have configured your frameworks, next come monitoring. And as we all know, industry is moving towards proactive continuous controls monitoring. This becomes super important in the journey of compliance to detect any misconfigurations, both from a policy perspective and also from like violations perspective and whatnot. Monitoring helps us to achieve proactive compliance. It helps you to see the complete picture of what's happening at the root level, what are the issues, how you can fix those issues perfectly. It can help you to identify right answers quickly. If your control has drifted or regressed at a state under your certain threshold, you can quickly detect it and solve for it and rectify it. And it helps you to streamline investigation of what's going wrong and what I need to do to make sure my controls are still there and I'm still compliant with a certain regulation and whatnot. Now, the last piece and the most difficult piece is auditing. How I'm gonna get transparency into all the things that I have configured, how I can do on-demand auditing, on-demand reports and evidence generation. This is like the top of the mind question for everybody, especially in the cloud. How Compliance Manager helps is, first of all, it helps you to define the standards and compliance regimes that are relevant for you. As I said, in the configuration, you can quickly configure that particular regulation or bring your own framework or regulation as well. It helps you, as a part of our audit workflow, we have baked in a workflow which helps you to understand the shared responsibility. What is the cloud provider responsibility versus your responsibility? What is shared responsibility? So that you have clear picture of what exactly you need to do to achieve the intent of this particular control. And then next is a super simple one-click button, run the assessment. Once you run the assessment, you can get the proof of compliance, which is assessment report, and as well as the relevant machine-readable evidence for a particular control. And not only that evidence, we want to provide transparency into where we found there was a gap or a violation, and then if there is a violation, how to rectify the violations. So this completes the overall Compliance Manager workflow of configuring, monitoring, and audit. Now, just to wrap things up, right? Like we covered a lot. Deep spoke about what's the future of compliance and how modern compliance gonna look like. I'm just gonna sum it up. Like how we are challenging the status quo and going from reactive to risk-based, proactive as well, thought process on compliance. AI is playing a big role. We are seeing a lot of AI and machine learning capabilities to automate compliance. A lot of manual tasks are getting modernized by using AI. Continuous control monitoring is again like a big theme we are trying to do with the technology here, as you saw in the previous slides. We are also achieving the goal of continuous machine readable auditing, removing tons and tons of toils. Like earlier, it used to take customers years and years to identify how they're going to achieve compliance on the cloud. We are making it fairly simple for them, reducing time and money and efforts, and of course, giving high confidence in overall posture and managing that posture appropriately. Thank you so much for listening in today, and we are happy to connect with you offline if needed. Thank you.